CSS box model. So it's a fundamental concept for understanding layout and design on web pages. Now each element on a web page is considered a rectangular box with layers that determine how much space it occupies. Alright, and then we have different components of box model in CSS. So what this means that every HTML element that you see or that you type in your HTML code, right, is represented as a box. So you see it as a box, whether it is a child element or parent element, it is actually a box, and it occupies it, we can determine the layer of this element and then the space that they occupy on the web. So the components of box model are the content, okay, the actual content. We have padding. So first we have content. So the actual area where content like text, images, or other media is displayed. So it has a default width and height based on the content size, which can be adjusted using CSS. Then we have padding. Padding is the space between the content and the border. So increases the space around the content inside the element, and then it can be set for each size individually. So we have padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and we have padding left. So 4 sizes actually, alright, or all size simultaneously. So example, you can say padding is a CSS property and say 10 pixels. So this example here means that you are applying 10 pixels to the 4 size of the elements, that is to the top, left, bottom, and right. So we have border. So border surrounds the padding, if any, and the content. Okay, so that's the outline basically, and can have various styles: solid, dashed, none. We have dotted, we have double. So we've seen this during the border session, right? So can have various styles, width, or colors. So we have border styles, border width, and border colors. So example, border 2 pixels solid black. So this we apply 2 pixels width and then style of solid and then color black on the element. So we have margin, which is the last one. So margin is the space outside the border, separating the elements from surrounding elements. So it does not affect the content or the box internal dimensions, but creates space between elements. So you can consider margin as the space that you have outside of the element, and then padding the space inside. So padding the space between the content and the border, while the margin is the space that you have outside the border. So margin can also be set for each side individually. That is, we have margin top, margin right, margin left, margin bottom, or all sides simultaneously. And the margin property set to 20 pixels is a good example. All right, so let's see a good diagram of what this looks like. Now look at this frame, look at this diagram right here. You can consider this portion here as the content, your content, right? And we mentioned that the content comes with the default width and height, which is determined by the size of the content. So if you create an element, if you remember what an element is a combination of opening tag, closing tag, and the actual content, right? So content can actually be a text, like my name is Timilehin, right? So my name is Timilehin can actually be the content. Now the width of the content at that point is wherever the my name is actually start from and then where the content ends. All right, and then we have the height. So height is actually the vertical height or the vertical line basically of the content. So here is the padding, and then we have the border and we have the margin. So padding again is the space between the content and the border. All right, and the border surrounds the content, surrounds the padding if any. All right, so the outline, and then we have margin, which is actually the outside space or the outer space we have on that element. And remember, a box actually has 4 sides, right? The top, the right, the bottom, and then the left. So look at this one too, right here. So this value here is set on the content. So 794 by 160, 794 by 160. This means that the content width is 794, and then the height of the content is 160. And then if you look at the other layer here is the padding, right? After the content, we have the padding, the border, and then the margin. Now, the padding here means that the padding top for this content is 50. The padding right is 20, padding bottom is 50, and the padding left is 20. And then we have border, which has 5 for the first size. So border top 5, border right 5, bottom 5, border left 5. And then margin, we have 50 to the top, 30 to the right, 50 to the bottom, and then 30 to the left. Right. So let's see how we can calculate the total width and total height of an element. So an element combines all these layers together. So CSS box model will determine the space that each element occupy on the web page. It is very important, especially if you are creating layouts, okay, or you are creating designs in your HTML document. So again, let's see how we can calculate the total element size. So we have the width and the height of an element. So calculating total element size, the total width and height of an element are calculated as, so for total width, the content width, okay, plus, okay, for the width, right, content width plus padding left and right, border left and right, and margin left and right. All right. And then for the total height, you have the content height plus padding top and bottom, or border top and bottom, right? Because height obviously is the vertical line, right? The vertical axis. And then lastly, the margin top and bottom. This will generate the total height of the element. So this understanding is essential for correcting sizing and positioning elements on a web page. All right. So if I take you back to the diagram right here. So the total width of this element is now 794. So this 794 is only applied to the content. So content does not determine the width of the entire box or the width of the entire element. Right. So an element is the combination of the opening tag, the closing tag, and the content. So content right here, this is the dimension for our content, 794 by 160. But if you now want to calculate the total width of an element, right, that means you have to add up the width of the content, which is 794, and then the padding left and right, 20 and 20, right, and then border left and right, 5 and 5, and then margin left and right, 30 and 30. This will tell you the total width of the element. And then if you want to calculate the total height of the element, that means you have to get the height of the content first, 160, okay, and then 50, 50, that's padding top and bottom, and then border top and bottom 5, 5, then margin top and bottom 50, 50. This will give us the total height of the element. So quickly, let's see what we can do with that in our code. So I have created this box model.html. So we have the external style sheet. Is empty right now and does not be linked. So quickly in the edge section, I'm going to link it. So it is a self-closing tag. We have this relationship, which is a style sheet, then hypertext reference. They live in the same directory, so I can simply reference it by the name of the file. All right, so I'm going to leave this h1 right here. Then I'm going to create maybe an h2 and say heading 2. Good. So this is h2 element, right? What makes this an element is because it has an opening tag, closing tag, and content. The content here is heading 2, right? This is heading 2 is the content. So I'm going to save this and head back to the browser and then refresh. So we have this is heading 2. Now I'm going to inspect these elements in my developer tool. So to inspect elements in our developer tool, one way you can do that is to right click on that actual element, right? Right click and then you select inspect. To inspect, and then shortly the developer tool will be open. So we have it here. You might see us at the footer, that's Yes, footer side, or it can be at the right side or at the left side. You can change it how you want it. All right. So, but then, uh, we want to ensure that we have selected the heading too. If you look at my document, this is the HTML element, right? We have the head, right? Sorry, we have the head and our meta tags, the title, and then the link. Okay, we just link the CSS file right now. Ensure that heading 2 is selected. So this is my heading 2 basically. Now, what I want us to focus on right now is this box right here. So look at this here. We have 886 by 27. So what this means is that the width of the content, not the width of the box, the width of the content right now is 886, and then the height is 27. And if you look at the padding, we don't have any padding here. That's why you're seeing this dash. So dash, padding top is dash, padding right is 0, padding bottom is 0, padding left is 0 as well. Similarly, we don't have any border. We haven't applied border yet. And then it comes with default margin. That is why we have this margin right here. Margin to the top and margin to the right. So some element actually comes with default margin. All right. Don't worry, I'm going to show us how to remove all those margin or any default padding that comes with any of our elements. So margin that comes with this element by default is 19.920 to the top and to the bottom as well. All right. So which means at this point we only have width set on the element. So if I head back to the browser, for instance, and select this H2 in my external style sheet, I select this H2 and say H2 width 500 pixel. Initially, we have the width of the content set to 836. Please take note of this value. The initial value is 836, but right now we have set the width that's from our code. If I refresh the page now, the 836 will change to 500. So I'm going to refresh now. Refresh, good. Now, what do we have here? We have 500 by 27. So the 27 still remain because that is the height, and we haven't touched the height right now. So the width of the content now has been reduced, or it has been changed from the initial value to the value that we specify in our code. All right. And then, for instance, now if I do not want the default height that actually comes with the content, right? I will give this height of 50 pixels. Save this back to the browser. We have 27 as the initial value. So after this has been refreshed, let's look at the height now. We have 50. So 500 by 50 coming from the value that we set right in our code. All right. So next up, let's look at padding. I'm going to set padding on this element. I will say padding 25 pixels. Remember, padding is the space between the content and the border, or the inner space. Okay. So 25 pixels. I'm going to refresh. Okay, before then, look, we don't have any padding. We have padding to the top, left, right, and bottom 0, 0, 0, 0. So if I refresh this right now, you see the element has adjusted a little bit because we have applied a padding on the element. And then if you look at the box model right now, we have 25 to the top, 25 to the right, to the bottom, and then to the left as well. And then let's now apply border. If I say border, say for instance 3 pixels, solid black, using hexadecimal value, black will give us 0, 0, 0, right? Or you can make it 6. So since we have identical pair, we can just use 3. So save this, head back to the browser, and then refresh. And then we have the border basically. And if you look at the model, we have 3, 3, 3, 3. All right. So we can as well mutate the value of this margin, the default margin that comes with the elements. We can mutate it right in our code by setting the margin. So you can say I want margin of 20 instead, 20 pixels. So this 20 will affect the fore size of the box. So refresh, you see, we have the outer space. So margin is the outer space, while padding is the inner space. Padding is the space between the content and the border, and then margin is the space outside, that is the border and then the surrounding elements. So the surrounding elements of this box now is actually what we have outside the border. And then if you look at the box, we have margin 20 to the top, left, right, and bottom. Right. So this is how we can size elements using different components of box model. All right, so we mentioned that we can style them individually. So which means, for instance, if you actually want padding top to be 50 and you want padding right to be 20, you want bottom to be maybe 10 and then left to be 5, right? How do we do that? So I'm going to create another element right now. I'll head back to the HTML document and say I'm going to use another element actually. I will say div. I will create a div. I will say this is a div, a div. This is a div element. Save this. Now let's get the content first. Okay, so we have this content right now, and now we head back to the browser and to the code. What I'm going to do is I would like to give this an ID or class. Doesn't matter. I will say maybe box1. Okay, so right in the external style sheet, we have given that div a class name box1, and remember to use the class selector, we need the dot operator first. So the dot operator to specify that this is a class selector, then followed by the class name, which is box1. So this box1 is what we have right here, box1. Okay, so box1. First, I would like to set the border. Let's get the border so that we can see what is going on. So border, I will say 1 pixel. Before then, let's ensure that we select the elements to see the actual value. So I'm going to, okay, so I don't need to right click on this anymore since my developer tool is opened up, right? So what I can do is I can just go and select the element right here, the div. So if I select this div, then the box will now change to give me the actual value of the selected element, which is the div, right? So you can see the div has a width of 836 by default, and then the initial value for the height is 18. And the div doesn't come with default margin, unlike H2. You saw what happened with H2, right? H2 comes with default margin to the top and bottom of I think 19.5 or 19.2 thereabouts. But div doesn't come with any margin, right? So you have to specify the margin you want, the padding you want, the border you want, and probably the width and height you want of the content. So let's do that. So first, I would like to set the border, just as I've mentioned, for us to see what is going on. So I will say border, maybe 1 pixel solid, red using hexadecimal code. We have F00. Again, you can use 3 characters because we have identical pair if we have to use 6, right? So FF0000 is the same thing as F00. This will give us red as well. So to the browser, if I refresh now, then we should have this red border on our elements. So first thing, I would like to set the width and height. Again, the width of this element, or if you look at the border now, it has 1, 1, 1, 1 across the 4 sides, right? Now, if I do not want, okay, let's first set the width and height. So the width, the initial value for the width is 834, and then height is 18. So I want to resize it to 350 by 200, maybe 350 by 80. Okay, so which means height, width, we have a width of 350 pixels, and then height 80 pixels. Save this to the browser and then refresh. So look at this, we have resized the dimension of the content. Mind you, this width and height gets applied to only the content. The content here is, this is a div element. All right, this is a div element. So the width that we specify here, 350, is not the width for the entire box. All right. So to calculate the width of the entire box, that means you have to add up the width of the content, the padding to the left and right, the border to the left and right, and then the margin to the left and right to get the total width of the elements. All right. So and then I'm going to set padding. Now, padding, one more time, is the space between the content and the border. So I think we're going to see that clearly right now. So you can see this content. The content is quite at the top, right? The top of this border right now. So I want to set padding to the top alone. So I want a space above, okay, an inner space above the content. So to achieve that, we have padding top. So I can see padding dash top. So padding dash top, I want 25 pixels or maybe 28. And play around with the values if you want. 28 pixels. If I refresh now, you see I have been able to create inner space, okay, inside the box basically. So there is now space between the content and the border. And if you look at our box model right now, we've been able to model the padding, only the padding to the top. So padding to the top has 28. To the right, we still have 0. To the bottom, we have 0. And then to the left, we also have 0. So let's set the other size. So for instance, if I want padding to the right to be, let's say, 5 pixels, and then padding bottom as 10 pixels, yes, 10, and then lastly, padding left, so 15 pixels. So 28, 5, 10, 15, 28, 5, 10, 15. Save this to the browser, refresh. So, and if you look at the model, the box model, we have 28, 5, 10, 15. All right, so we have successfully set the individual padding for each size of the box. So we have the shorthand property for padding, which was what we use at that's on the what's it called, heading 2. This padding right here is the shorthand property for padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left. So if you want to set the value individually using shorthand property, we can achieve that as well. So this value, the way it is right now, if you want to use shorthand property, so at first I'm going to comment these lines, this 4 line, save, then refresh. So it's back to the default. And right now you can see we don't have padding anymore. So back to our code, using shorthand property to achieve the same layout. Now, if you are setting this value, for instance, you can pass 4 values for 4 sides of the box. If you are setting it, note that the value gets applied clockwise. So clockwise means that it will go from the top to the right to the bottom and then to the left. Clockwise from the top to the right to the bottom and then to the left. So it goes this way, to your right, to the bottom, to the left, and then to the top back again. That's what clockwise actually means. So if you are setting the value, always have that in mind. So if I want 28 to be at the top, that means I will have 28 first, and if I want 5 to be at the right, 5 go next. No comma, please, just space. We use space to separate each value. And if I want 10 at the bottom, then we go next, and then 15 goes to the right. So which means this is top, this is right, this is bottom, and then this is left for shorthand property. I'm going to save this, head back to the browser. Good. So we still have the same results. So 28, 5, 10, 15. We have the same results as before. All right. So that's not the end basically. There are more things you can do basically. Now, for instance, if you want to set, let me take it back to the browser. If you want padding to the top and bottom to have the same value and left to the right to have the same value, which is quite common whenever you are creating designs, right? Usually we give padding to the top and right the same value and left and right the same value, right? Most times that's what you'll be doing. So which means you can pass 2 values basically. or at first, right, if I say adding, let's say 50 pixels, this means that 50 goes to the top, 50 goes to the right, 50 goes to the bottom, 50 goes to the left. So let me save this and confirm that. Refresh, and then you can see 50, 50, 50, 50. But if you want, let's say 30, 30, 20, 20, that's 30 to the top and bottom, 30 to the left and right. So 30 and 20, right? 30, so we have 30, 20. So this means 30 goes to the top and bottom, and then 20 goes to the left and right. Let's confirm that. Refresh. You see we have 30 to the top, 30 to the bottom, 20 to the left, 20 to the right. And then if you have three values, for instance, if you have three values, um, you have three values, adding, let's say 25 pixels, 10 pixels, and let's say 18 pixels. So how these three values get applied on each side of the box is that 25 goes to the top, 10 to the right, 18 to the bottom, then this 10 goes to the left. So 25 to the top, 10 goes to left and right, and then 18 goes to the bottom. Let's try that. So remember, 10 goes to left and right, then this to the top, 18 to the bottom. Save, refresh. So 25, 10 to the right, 10 to the left as well, and then 18 to the bottom. It's as simple as that. And finally, if you have one value, it goes round basically. So you have 20 pixels, 20 to the top, 20 to the right, 20 to the bottom, and then 20 to the left. Very simple. And next up, we have margin. It's the same thing, just that you know that margin is the space we have outside, and the outer space, the surrounding space between the border and the surrounding elements. That is what we call margin. So for instance now, the margin between this box with black border and red border is basically the space we have between these two border, actually the border bottom and then the border top for red. So this is the margin basically. All right, so the surrounding space is the margin, while the inner space, that is space between the content and the border, is what we call the padding. Okay, so let's just play around with hue margin. So let's say margin, let's say 5 pixels. So you already know what this does, right? This 5 is shared. I mean, it gets applied to the top, to the left, right, and bottom as well. So save this, head back to the browser and refresh. So you see we have 5, 5, 5, 5. If I increase the value now, let's say I want, if I give this margin, let's say 150 pixels, and then to the right 20, and then 45, or maybe 10, and then 45 pixels. So what this means that margin top, so clockwise, top, right, bottom, and left. That's what this means. So I will head back to the browser and refresh. So you see, you've been able to create enough margin, 150. So 150 pixels to the top, 20 to the right, 10 to the bottom, and then 45 to the left. All right, and then that's for 4 values. Then if you have values like 10, 15, maybe 22 and 14, I'm sorry, 22, so just 3 values. So it means 10 to the top, 15 to the left and right, and then 22 to the bottom. And then if you have margin, say 10, 20 pixels, so 10 goes to the top and bottom, 20 goes to left and right. It's as simple as that. Yeah, please, do we have any question? Do you have questions? Okay, no question, I guess. Question. All right, next up, let's see how we can size elements. Take it back to sizing elements. So we have box sizing property in CSS. So box dash sizing, and it has two values. Okay, so box sizing is a property in CSS which has two values. That's content box, which is the default, and then we also have border box. So content box, the width and height properties only include the content. Padding and border are added to the content size, increasing the element's total size. So example, box sizing, then you set the value to content box. And then the other hand, we have border box as a second value. So the width and height properties include the content, padding, and border. This makes it easier to manage element sizing. So if you set the value of box sizing to border box, right? Whatever width you set on that element, right, we account for other layers, okay, or other components of box model. That is your padding, your margin, and your border. No, the padding and border, just padding and border, just as you can see from the description. The width and height property include the content, the padding, and the border, which makes it easier to manage element sizing. All right, so it simplifies layout calculations, especially when setting fixed dimensions. All right, so practice uses of box model. Number one, we have the spacing and layout. So understanding box model helps in setting margins and padding for element spacing, or also for responsive design. So adjusting padding, borders, and margins for different screen sizes to improve layout fluidity, and then the centering elements. Use margin auto, okay? That is margin zero auto to horizontally center elements within a container. Now this margin has two values, right? Zero and auto. Remember? So if you have two values, it means that the first one will go to the top and bottom, and then the second value will go to the left and right. So zero goes to the top and bottom, and then auto goes to left and right. And what this means is that it's going to keep that element to the center of its container. So this center or horizontally center element within the container. Let's see this first before we look at box sizing. But before then, let's read up this content and then we move on to the next thing. So common box model issues and solutions. Collapsing margins. Now, when two vertical margins meet, right, they may collapse into one. So avoid this by using padding or borders when necessary. So as much as possible, avoid the use of margin. So if there's a way you can actually adopt the use of padding or border to create space, you can use that basically. And then box sizing problems. Use box sizing border box for more predictable sizing in layout designs. Let's see this. Let's see this in action. Some of the problems this may actually lead to. So before I move on to box sizing, let's look at that margin. What's it called? The margin zero auto. So I will take this back to box model.html document, and I'm going to create a section right here, section, and right in the section I will create a div element, or maybe an h3, and say this is heading 3. Remember, every element is considered or is represented by a rectangular box. So which means section is an element, right? Because it has opening tag, closing tag, and the contents. So content for section is another element, and the element is this H3, right? H3 is another element. So which means we can represent this H3 as a rectangular box and then section as another rectangular box because they are elements. All right. So let's see how we can model these two elements and how we can keep this H3 at the center of its container. So its container right now is section because section happens to be the parent of this H3. So back to the external style sheet, section and H3, right? Good. So let's see the output first. I'm going to refresh. So we have it right here. This is heading 3. So first, I would like to give the section the border. So section border 1 pixel solid, maybe solid green, solid, maybe yeah green or blue. So 0 F0, right? Oh no, 00 F blue. Good. And I would like to give this width of 600, yeah, 600 pixels. 600 pixels. Nice. So now look at this. Look at this border. These two boxes right here. This one, the one with border of red, and this section with border of blue. As you can see, there is no space between them. So I can create space between them by using margin button on this, what's it called? This border, this element with red border. So, and it's this div right here, this div. So I can say margin button, maybe 15 pixels, 15 pixels for the margin button, and then if I refresh, so I've been able to create space, okay, between the two boxes. And if you want to use short-term property, okay, to set value on only the margin button, so all you need to do is say 0 to the top, 0 to the right, and then 15 to the bottom, and then 0 to the left. But I mean, there's no need of doing this since it's just one value. So you can just go and say margin bottom left, margin bottom 15 pixels. So I'm just doing this just to show you that you can do this as well, and then you should get the same results. So what's going on here? Okay, good. So we have the same results basically. But like I said, if you have just one value, you can just rely on the individual property. So margin bottom 15 pixels. So this will work as well. Great. So section now, I'm going to increase the height. I will give this height of maybe 80, just to increase a little bit. Okay, great. Now I'm going to give this H3 here another border, and I'm going to resize it. So H3 border 1 pixel solid, maybe black, 00 black, then refresh. So obviously it will occupy the full width of its parent because H3 is a block level element. Remember, a block level element starts on a new line and then they take the available space. So the available space right now is where the parent starts from and where it ends. So if I increase the width of the parent element, that is this section, right, the child element, that is this H3, will still occupy the available space because it is a block level element. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize it. I will reduce it a little bit, maybe give it a width of 400. I will give this H3 a width of 400 pixels. Save this. And then now, great. So right now, if I want to center this H3 right horizontally inside its container, so that is where we can now use the margin. Look at it right here. So now centering elements, use margin auto, that is margin 0 auto, to horizontally center elements within a container. So on the H3 now, I'm going to set the margin to 0. 0 means I don't want any margin to the top and bottom of this element. But auto here now means that, now what this auto means is that if I head back to the browser, let's look at this output. The available space here, right? Now the reason we have this space here is because we have resized this element, right, to have a width of 400 pixels. So which means we have 200 pixels space left. And that's because section has a width of 600 pixels. Let's confirm that. So I'm going to select section right here. Look at this. This is section. Select. And then if you look at it here, it has a width of 600 pixels. Then if you select H3, H3 has a width of 400 pixels. So 600 minus 400, that's 200. So which means the available space that is left right here is 200 pixels, right? Now, if we want to keep this H3 to the center of its container, that is this section, so we can set this value right here, margin 0 and then auto. So if I refresh now, you can see we don't have any margin to the top. So that works basically because we mentioned that we don't want margin to the top of that element and then to the bottom as well. And then auto, which means that keep the element at the center of its container. Please, do you understand? Hello, do you have any question?
You explain that part.
You say what? Farouk,
I said
you mentioned what?
you said you explain the part.
Okay, someone mentioned that auto. Okay, so if I set the value right now, um, so Farouk, what just happened right now is we centralize an element horizontally inside its container. So this content right here, okay, this box with black border has a container. The container is this section with blue border. Are we together? So to keep it at the center is just we just explained right now. So we mentioned that setting the margin to 0 auto means that we don't want margin to the top and bottom, and then auto here means that automatically divide the available space and then share the margin to the left and right equally, such that the elements will be at the center of its container. Does that make sense, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Someone said auto as a data scholar, right? If you refresh the page now, you still have the same result because right now you cannot actually move it. To actually move this element right away from the top, that means you have to apply or maybe some margin, maybe five pixels. So that way you can actually move this content away from the top. So if I refresh now, you see I've been able to move it. Let me increase the value a little bit, maybe 25 to make it more visible. Refresh. Okay, great. So I've been able to move it. So giving it 25 to the top and then 25 to the bottom as well. And then right now, what happens is that the available space is being shared to the left and right, such that the element is now at the center of its container horizontally. Don't worry, there are other better ways of centering elements in the HTML. So by the time we get to Flexbox, CSS Flexbox, you're going to see more of this, or grid in CSS. So we have interesting way of putting elements at the center of its container. So this, I mean, we've started creating layout, trust me, and which is what web design is all about. So we're building components, nice, attractive, sleek, and good-looking components. And CSS box model is the first level you need to understand layouts in web design. Like I said, it's the most fundamental concept when it comes to layouts, okay, in web design. So it is very important. This session is very, very important. I will encourage us to read more on CSS box model, rewatch the video if you can, and then try to practice on your own as well. All right, okay, so next up, let's look at box sizing. Box sizing. Box sizing. I'm going to create a div. This is a box. So I will use internal CSS. So the style tag, and then okay, before then, let's see. So box underscore sizing. Size. Okay, so this is a box. This is a box. So I want to select the element. This is a box. Great. So same width 836 width and then height of 18 pixels height, and the first thing I would like to do is to first set the width of the div. The width is let's say 300 pixels. So I actually want us to focus on the width basically at this point. Let's confirm that. Okay, let's give this border so we can see what's going on. So black color using RGB. It's going to be 000. Save this and refresh. Great. So we have this. And then I'm going to set margin and padding as well. Margin and padding. Margin of, let's say, 10 pixels. And then okay, we actually don't need margin at this point when it comes to box sizing. The only thing we need is the border and padding and then the width. So great. So look at the box model at this point. We have the width set to 300 pixels, right? And then margin to the left and right is 1010, and then border is 11. So which means the total width of this element, is not 300, but what? That's 322. Yes, 322. And how do I know that? So 300 plus 10 plus 10 plus 1 and then plus 1. So let's start from here. 1 plus 10, that's 11. Then plus 300, that's 311. And then plus 10, that's 321. Then plus 1, that's 322. So 322 is the total width of this element at this point. And that is because the default value of box sizing is content box. So content box do not actually account for the width and height whenever we are setting. Sorry, it do not account for the padding and border whenever we are setting the width of the element, and that is why the width still remain as 300, and then the padding, the width still remain as 300. But if you want to get total width of the element, you have to add up the padding to the left and right and border to the left and right. So this way it is actually difficult for us to determine the actual width of an element. So if you are designing and then you set the width of that element on that content, that width does not apply to the entire element but the content of the element. So for instance, at this point I can't say the width of this element, this div element is 300. No, I will have to start adding up 300 plus padding to the left and right, that's 20, and then border to the left and right, 1, that's 2, which can be quite tedious when we are designing. So to avoid that, we need to set the box sizing value. just as mentioned, this is the default. The default is content box. Then you have to set value to border box. So what this border box does is that it will ensure that the exact width or the total width of this particular element here is whatever width you set in your property, that's in the CSS width property. So which means by the time we calculate the total width in our box model, it should amount to 300, exactly 300. Now let's refresh now and see now. Note that I've changed the value of box sizing to border box. So I'm going to refresh. So before that, we still have width set to 300, right? I'm going to refresh the page. Now look at it right now. Now the width is now 278. So if we add up the padding and margin, this should amount to exactly 300. So let's add up. Now we have 3, 10, 10, that's 20. Then 1, 1, that's 2. So that's 22. So 22 plus 278. So that should give us 300. So if you are creating layouts, always ensure that your box sizing property is set to border box, and that is why in most designs we usually have something like this in our remember the selector. This selector is what we call universal selector. So in our universal selector, usually we set margin to 0, padding to 0, and then we will say what box sizing border box. So what this means is that this universal selector, it selects all the elements in your HTML document. Now, what this means is that if we have some element that comes with default margin or padding, we don't want it. So set all the margin and padding to 0, and then box sizing, ensure that it is border box, because we don't want to start adding up the padding and border whenever we are writing our CSS styles. So whatever width we set or whatever value we set on the width property of an element should remain the total width of that element and not the content alone. Please, do we understand? Guys, do you understand, please?
Yes.
All right. All right. We're almost done. We're almost done. We're almost done. We're almost done. So let's take it back. Let's take it back. Let's take it back. Okay, so you see it again. Box sizing property. Content box is the default. The width and height properties only include the content. Padding and border are added to the content size, increasing the element's total size. So content size is not the same thing as the element size. The element is the entire box, while content is inside the element. All right. And then border box, the width and height properties include the content, padding, and border. So this makes it easier to manage element sizing. And then it simplifies layout calculations, especially when setting fixed dimensions. So I mentioned the other time that there was some common box model issues and solutions. So we have box sizing. So whenever you're using box sizing, ensure that the value is border box for more predictable sizing in layout designs.